you had a very big career. You start in local television in Seattle, you go to a local station in New York, which of course is where you go when you're being noticed. And then you got picked up at ABC while still very, very young. Good Morning America, then 2020, the big prestigious show at ABC. And before long, you're a co-anchor of 2020. All a very big deal. And as you move upward in this career, you're moving to the right politically. How come?
I was mugged by reality. I won the Emmys, criticizing business, calling for regulation. The same story about the TV repair shops. The politicians would call after and say, that was great television. We're going to fix that. We're going to pass a law. And young John Stossel was so flattered. All these important people are paying attention to me. And they created a Department of Consumer Affairs because of that. And I was so happy. But then I would do this thing again a year later. And the results were the same. Most people were honest. Some would cheat. And I went, so what's the department doing? And I'd go there, and there were a bunch of dreary desks and people filling out forms. And now they were licensing all repair shops. And that sounds good. We like licensing. We license drivers. We license dogs. It makes people feel safe. But they weren't improving the quality. What was going on? So I saw that it made everything cost more. And now if you wanted to run a repair shop, you had to hire a lawyer just to understand the rules. If you were an immigrant, maybe you couldn't do it. You had to go underground, or you didn't do it at all. And it didn't make it better. And I saw it again and again. They weren't stopping the consumer fraud. Then I thought, aha, the trial lawyers will do it because they have real clout. I can just tell people. They can make them pay and compensate the victim. I'd refer people to trial lawyers because consumers now were calling me and saying, this person ripped me off and so forth. How am I going to solve this? Government? No. Trial lawyers. Then people would call and say, my lawyer ripped me off. So I looked at the conservative press. I looked at National Review. And they seemed at the time to be wanting to police the bedroom and police the world. And that didn't appeal to me either. I had grown up in the New York Times. They no longer made sense. National Review didn't fully make sense to me. I discovered Reason magazine, the libertarian magazine. And that was an epiphany. It was, oh my goodness, these people really get it. And they understand it better than I. And they're talking about Locke and John Stuart Mill. I read them in college, but I didn't connect these dots. And then I realized there was another truth out there. And I read a little more, and I became a born-again free marketer.
28 years at ABC, and one of the summary statements in No They Can't is as follows. What intuition tempts us to believe, big business runs the media, so the media support big business. What reality taught me, the media hate business, close quote.
The kind of people who go into journalism don't like capitalism. And people at universities don't like capitalism. I'm trying to figure out what this is about. At first I thought, well, it's because the college professor, his slightly stupider roommate, went into business and makes more than he does, so he's envious.
Resentful, right.
And the wealth disparity makes people uncomfortable. It's a byproduct of freedom. If you have a free market, some people are going to get absurdly rich and others don't have that. But then I thought about the kings and queens of old Europe. And they have vastly more wealth than the average person, yet they weren't hated, they were revered. But people hated the bourgeoisie. They gave them that nasty name. They hated the very people, this is a Thomas Sowell insight, they hated the very people who sold them the things they needed to make their lives better. So I'm trying to think, what's that about? And there's all this hatred of me at the same time, because I live in Manhattan. Somebody came up to me on the street and said, you John Stossel? Yes. I hope you die soon. And at first I thought it was because they considered...
By the way, you write that Peter Jennings, when you passed in the hallway, Peter Jennings would avert his eyes.
And more dramatically, he would go.
Oh, really?
Because I was an embarrassment to ABC News, because I was not objective. So do they hate me because I'm a conservative? And where I live, that's like being a child molester. It's the worst thing you can be. But I'm a libertarian. I'm a lousy conservative. I think homosexuality is just fine, and drugs should be legal, and gambling and sex work between consenting adults. So I would thought the liberals would like me, but they're so angry because I'm a consumer reporter defending laissez-faire capitalism. And why are they so threatened by that? And I think it's because intuitively you think of business as a zero-sum game, or liberals do.
Right.
So if Bill Gates got a lot of money, we must have less. If somebody makes a profit, I have less. That's why they hated the bourgeoisie. They don't understand that business is win-win.
Segment 3, the economy, the government, and us. No, they can't. What intuition tempts us to believe, government can get the economy moving again. What reality taught me, government does not spend money better than individuals do. Close quote. Explain that.
The economy is not like an orchestra that needs a conductor to start or a car that needs jump starting. An economy is people with needs. And if you leave them alone, they will do amazing, wonderful things to achieve those needs. I mean, we take them for granted. We take it for granted that a supermarket has 30,000 products, and they're all cheap, and it's well lit, and it's open 24/7, and they rarely poison us. People do stuff if we don't get in the way. And the Keynesians in the administration were saying, we can spend money better than the private sector can. We have to start it, and this multiplier effect, which is just nonsense. The government can create jobs. They created jobs building pyramids, but think how much wealthier the Egyptians would have been had they been free to pursue their own interests.
John, the financial crisis of 2008, former Fed Chairman Alan Greenspan testifying before Congress. Alan Greenspan, I note for you, my libertarian friend, my reader of Reason magazine, was a disciple and friend of Ayn Rand. As libertarian as they come. Alan Greenspan. Well, okay, quote.
Isn't anymore.
Quote.
Isn't in this quote you're about to read.
No, yes, it is, in a way. I'm testifying before Congress. Alan Greenspan, I made a mistake in presuming that the self-interest of banks was such that they were best capable of protecting their own shareholders, that the loan officers of those institutions knew more about the risks involved than even our best regulators. A critical pillar to free markets did break down. That shocked me. I still do not fully understand why it happened, close quote. If Alan Greenspan says that the financial crisis of 2008 was a market failure, who is John Stossel to gainsay him?
And who's John Stossel when Hank Paulson and Tim Geithner and all these very smart Wall Street experts say they had to bail these people out?
Yeah.
Well,
in other words, how do you put the... A lot of people will say, right, okay, I'm with you in the great general arc of sort of the Matt Ridley argument. If you start 1,000 years ago, the upward climb is impressive. But come on, John, we've got problems with capitalism. It needs adjustment. It needs oversight. Latest example, 2008. And John Stossel replies,
the oversight won't work. And the overseers will never understand the banking business and the tricks or the cheating as well as the cheaters and the tricksters will. So you can pass Sarbanes-Oxley after Enron. That's going to end all the scams in the future. And that didn't stop Bernie Madoff or the housing bubble. And Dodd-Frank isn't going to stop this either. And Alan Greenspan's problem, I believe, is that, and watching from the point of view of the media over these years, is that the people closest to the panic always get too scared. The global warming scientists say, we have to take action against global warming. The bird flu doctors want all our money to go to researching bird flu. The killer bee coming up from Mexico going to sting us all to death. The Y2K computer experts that said the planes are going to crash. They all want government action. Robert Higgs said war is the friend of the state. Well, so is crisis and fear. The thing is that the global warming experts and the killer bee experts were not in the Treasury Department. It did not have the power to scarf up $1 trillion of your dollars and give it to their friends who were scared and calling from Goldman Sachs. Oh my God, it's the end of the world. I'm losing everything. You have to rescue this company. And they got scared. I argue market discipline will protect us better. And that means no privileges, no bailouts.
Okay, so let me just another one of these summary statements. What intuition tempts us to believe, some institutions are too big to fail. What reality taught me, failure makes markets work. Okay, so you're saying that the conventional wisdom is now that the government made a big mistake in failing to bail out Lehman Brothers. That was the mistake. That was what caused the trouble. Stossel says, no, go back. The mistake was the bailout, was supporting Bear Stearns and arranging a sale, saving the institute. Should have let him go down. The mistake was bailing out AIG. That's your position,
Or
right?
Bear Stearns would have, at the right price, found a buyer for whatever assets they had left. Likewise, GM.
So your argument is not that absent government intervention, there would have been no crisis. Your argument is we're human beings. We live in a fallen world. People screw up. Sometimes they screw up in large ways. Capitalism will experience crises. The government would make it worse. You're not saying that it would be crisis-less without the government. You're simply saying the government would make it worse, right? Or does make it worse.
Yes, but it's
right?
worse than that. I'm saying more than that. I'm saying government caused the crisis. Canada didn't have the same housing bubble. They don't have a Fannie and Freddie, and they have the same rate of home ownership. And government makes it worse because...
Greenspan pumped too much liquidity into the system.
Perhaps, probably. But more, we have the FHA and all these agencies subsidizing reckless behavior.
Okay. No, they can't. What intuition tempts us to believe, if auto companies are in trouble, government should encourage the purchase of new cars. I'm giving you an easy one after Alan Greenspan. What reality taught me, wealth will be destroyed and poor people will be hurt. Okay, go ahead. Take a stick to cash for clunkers.
It's again, intuitive, though. On the book tour, a woman came up to me and said, intuitive is a lousy word that you use because intuition is generally right. I said, well, what's a better word? She said, we're imprinted. And I think she may be right.
Conditioned, right, yeah.
Or instinct. I don't know, instinct is often right. But when Cash for Clunkers came out, a lot of people said, oh, yeah, this makes sense. The auto business is struggling. Pay people $3,000, get rid of old cars, and they pollute more. We'll clean the air a little and stimulate the auto business. But again, government has no money of its own. The $3,000 comes from somebody, it's taken from the private sector. Now, some of us might have bought a car that year. Some of us had our purchases sped up. The money went to the auto companies. It gave a bubble in car purchases. But then that goes down on the other end. More importantly, what did they do with these junked cars? They destroyed them. It really shows government arrogance to think you can create wealth by destroying things. Nancy Pelosi believed that and said that after the Haitian earthquake. This will cause a boom in Haiti, she said, because of the construction work. Paul Krugman, Nobel Prize winner, believed it and said that about 9/11. But it will cause some construction, but it's the Frederick Bastiat's broken window fallacy. A boy breaks a store window. Hey, he's creating a job for a janitor and a glassmaker. But that's the seen benefit. We can see that work.
Right.
What we can't see is that money is what that money might have been used for had the window not been broken. Maybe the storekeeper would have bought a shirt. Maybe he would have cured cancer.
John, what about the great, you've just batted away the 2008 crisis. What about the great Keynesian...
So why is it a crisis? Man, the stock market fell a lot, but in '82, the stock market was at 800. So we got up to 14,000 and fell to 8,000. It had had an amazing run.
That's because you were working at Midtown instead of downtown, so it wasn't a crisis for you.
It was horrible for them, but you know, a crisis is the Revolutionary War soldiers freezing when the British are coming, or the Civil War, or the bubonic plague. There's a crisis. Save our crises.
Okay, listen, the great Keynesian example is the economic benefit to the United States of the Second World War. We can agree, I think probably you and I do agree, that the evidence, Amity Shlaes and her Forgotten Man, the evidence that the New Deal actually lifted the economy is zero. It moved things around, it favored some people, didn't get things. But the Second World War comes along, the country shifts to a war footing, government spending expands enormously, and the economy hums. How come? If it's not government spending, if it's not the Keynesian argument that the private sector is spending too little, once the government kicks in, even if it's war spending, you get an economy humming.
It's a great question, and I'm not a student of that. My understanding is you had great national purpose. People worked together. The economy really started humming after the war. And you may remember, you may have read
I
that
hadn't, right.
when the soldiers were all coming home, people said unemployment is going to be hugely high, and yet it wasn't. Those soldiers found new things to do, and that, to my understanding, caused the boom. But I'm not a student of that.
Segment 4, John Stossel's Cold, Cold, Miserable Heart. No, they can't. Quote, my wife used to complain, I'm interested in that, used to complain that libertarian reasoning is cold-hearted. Since markets produce winners and losers, and many losers did nothing wrong, market competition is cruel. She had a point, didn't she?
Market competition is cruel. There are winners and losers. But that's better than the alternative where there are only losers.
All right. The President of the United States on simple fairness. And you pay close attention to this, please.
That means we have to make choices. When it comes to paying down the deficit and investing in our future, should we ask middle-class Americans to pay even more at a time when their budgets are already stretched to the breaking point? Or should we ask some of the wealthiest Americans to pay their fair share? That's the choice.
The Buffett rule. The Buffett rule. Rich people should be asked to pay at least the same proportion of their income as middle-class people. Transparently fair, right?
It sure feels fair, and I think it's a good political selling point. It's a much harder point to say they're not going to pay it no matter what, because the rich people are going to hire accountant and lawyer tricksters to escape it or move out of the jurisdiction. Or worse, they're going to do less, and some of them are the golden geese who provide opportunity for poor people. My response to, and these are much tougher things to say in simple politics. It's a tough battle. Obama is very clever. But I say to him, give me a break. You and Bush doubled spending. Under Clinton, we spent $2 trillion. Now we're approaching $4 trillion. It's the spending, stupid. Don't talk to me about taxes. And Milton Friedman was right. He says the tax levels are not what count. Government spending is what counts as a percentage of the economy. It doesn't matter if it's paid for in taxes or borrowing.
Sooner or later, it will be paid for by us.
Right.
Okay, a couple big facts about American history. Here's one. Ronald Reagan, broadly speaking, cut taxes and rolled back regulations, and the economy boomed. And then Bill Clinton resists the left in his own party, essentially ratifying, he raises taxes a little bit, but he's essentially ratifying the Reagan program of relatively low tax regime, relatively limited regulation, and the economy continues to boom. So we get, in some modest way at least, the John Stossel program 25 years ago, and we get 25 years of economic growth as a result. And now we have Barack Obama saying Obamacare is a good thing, extending government control over 1/6 of the economy, and by the way, we need higher taxes. Democracy just doesn't work. We don't learn. We don't learn. We have the example before our very eyes, and we refuse to learn from it. Cheer me up.
No, I'm not going to argue with you. It's upsetting to me. Thomas Jefferson said the natural progress of things. Government grows, liberty yields.